In the year 4829, after more than a century of endless war across shattered galaxies, a single act of unexpected mercy would ignite a rebellion no weapon ever could. Between a haunted human salvager and a dying Thalri warrior, a fragile spark of trust would challenge the greed of empires and change the fate of two civilizations forever. Threes. She expected the human to kill her, but he did something completely unexpected. The derelict Thalri warship loomed ahead, its once sleek hull now riddled with blast marks and debris. Threes. Kalen Voss maneuvered his salvage vessel alongside the floating wreckage. Threes. The asteroid field surrounding them casting long shadows across his viewport. Threes. Vexa scan for life signs. Kalen Voss ordered, securing his helmet. Threes. His ship's AI responded in its familiar cool tone. Threes. Scans inconclusive due to radiation interference. Threes. Exercise caution. Kalen Voss. Threes. Warship was engaged in battle approximately 72 hours ago. Just another day in paradise, Kalen Voss muttered, checking his oxygen levels. 6 hours should be enough. He pushed off from his airlock thrusters, propelling him across the void toward the gaping wound in the Thalri vessel's side. Threes. The war between humans and the Thalri had raged for 120 years now, turning the outer colonies into battlegrounds and creating a lucrative salvage market for those brave or desperate enough to ply it. Kalen Voss's mag boots connected with the alien ship's hull with a dull thud. Threes. He switched on his headlamp and drew his cutter, the blue-white beam casting eerie shadows as he sliced through a damaged airlock door. Entering the vessel, he reported back to Vexa, maintain position and be ready for a quick departure. The interior was a mess of tangled cables and twisted metal. Emergency lighting flickered weakly, casting a pale blue glow across surfaces designed for bodies different from his own. The artificial gravity was functioning at minimal levels, making each step feel like wading through shallow waters. Kalen Voss moved cautiously through the corridors, marking valuable components with his scanner. Threes. The Thalri built their ships with rare metals and crystalline technology that fetched premium prices on the black market. But something about this ship felt wrong. The battle damage was extensive, yet there were no bodies. Vexa, are you picking up any distress signals? Any chatter about this wreck? Negative. Kalen Voss, this sector is quiet. Too quiet. He pushed deeper into the vessel toward what his scanner indicated was the command center. The door was jammed halfway open, and as he squeezed through, his light caught something on the floor, a smear of luminescent blue, like someone had dragged a glow stick across the metal plating. Thalri blood, he whispered, crouching to examine it. Still wet, still glowing. Threes. He followed the trail, pulse quickening as it led away from the command center, down a narrow maintenance shaft. Threes. The blue streaks became more prominent, pooling in places before continuing onward. Something or someone had dragged themselves through here, wounded but alive. Threes. Kalen Voss's hand instinctively moved to the pistol at his hips. And Thalri survivor meant complications. It meant danger. It also meant a potential bounties. The Alliance paid handsomely for Thalri prisoners, especially officers who might have valuable intelligence. The trail ended at a small storage compartment. Kalen Voss paused outside, listening. His helmet's audio receptors picked up the faint sound of labored breathing from within. Threes. He drew his weapon, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open in one swift motion. Threes. The Thalri female lay curled against the far wall, one hand clutching a vicious wound in her side, the other wrapped around the handle of a disruptor pistol. Her skin, the color of burnished copper, was marked with intricate patterns that pulsed weakly with blue bioluminescence, a sign of distress among her kind. Threes. Her large, almond-shaped eyes, a startling shade of violet, fixed on him with a mixture of hatred and resignation. Threes. She raised her weapon with trembling fingers. Kalen Voss aimed his own pistol at her head. "Don't," he warned. Threes. Time seemed to stretch between them. Threes. The Thalri's respirations were shallow and rapid. The wound in her side continued to see blue luminescent fluid. Her military uniform, torn and charred, bore insignia that Kalen Voss recognized. Threes. Special Forces, high rank. Threes. This was no ordinary soldier. Threes. She spoke, her voice surprisingly melodic, despite the obvious pain. Threes. Finish it, human. Threes. Kalen Voss knew what he should do. Threes. An Thalri officer of her apparent rank would fetch at least 50,000 credits from Orion-Pact intelligence. With that kind of money, he could upgrade his ship, pay off his debts, maybe even buy citizenship in one of the inner colonies. But as he looked at her, something shifted in his chest. Threes. He'd seen too much death in the war before he'd walked away from military service. Too many bodies floating in the cold vacuum, human and Thalri alike. Threes. Instead of firing, Kalen Voss holstered his weapon and reached for the medical kit on his belt. Threes. The Thalri's eyes widened in confusion. "What are you doing? Something stupid?" "Probably." Threes. Kalen Voss replied, kneeling beside her. Soz. He pulled out a universal med scanner and ran it over her wound. "But I'm not in the business of executing wounded prisoners." "I am not your prisoner," she hissed, though her weapon lowered slightly as a spasm of pain crossed her features. Kalen Voss ignored her, examining the scanner's readout. "You've got internal bleeding and a punctured lung equivalent. You'll be dead in an hour without treatment." Threes. He reached for a vial of coagulant, designed to work with most known species. Threes. The Thalri watched him with increasing bewilderment as he prepared the injection. Threes. "Why would you save me?" she asked, genuine confusion in her voice. Threes. "Your kind has hunted mine to the edge of extinction." Threes. Kalen Voss paused, meeting her gaze. Threes. "Maybe I'm tired of this war." Threes. "This is going to hurt," he warned, then pressed the injector against her side. She gasped, her free hand instinctively grabbing his arm with surprising strength. Her skin felt fever-hot against his suit, and for a moment he thought she might try to kill him. Threes. Instead, her fingers gradually relaxed as the pain-blocking agents in the coagulant took effect. Threes. "I need to get you to my ship," Kalen Voss said. Threes. "Your injuries are beyond what I can treat here." Threes. Why?" she asked again, her luminescent markings fluctuating in patterns he couldn't interpret. "What do you want from me?" Kalen Voss shook his head. "Let's focus on keeping you alive." Threes. "We can figure out the rest later." Threes. A sudden explosion rocked the ship, nearly throwing Kalen Voss off balance. Vexa's voice came urgently through his calm. Threes. "Kalen Voss." Orion-packed patrol vessel just entered the system, Threes. You have approximately 5 minutes before they're in scanning range, Threes. The Thalari's eyes narrowed, Threes. Now you will claim your prize, human. Not today, Kalen Voss muttered, making a decision that would likely come back to haunt him. He holstered his scanner and gently slid his arms beneath the Thalari's body. Threes. Can you hold on to me? My ship's not far. Her expression cycled through disbelief, suspicion, and then grim determination, Threes. She nodded once, slipping her disruptor into a holster and wrapping her arms around his neck. As Kalen Voss carried her through the twisted corridors back toward his entry point, he could feel her studying him, trying to understand his motives. Her body was lighter than he expected, but radiated heat like a furnace, Thris. I am Neri, she said suddenly, her voice soft against his helmet. Kalen Voss paused, surprised by the unexpected introduction. Names were power in Thalari culture. That much he remembered from his military briefings. Kalen Voss, he replied simply, and we're about to become very good friends, or very dead, possibly both Threes. Kalen Voss's ship, the Nomad, shuddered as he pushed the thrusters beyond safe limits. The Orion-packed patrol vessel had detected them, but Kalen Voss knew these asteroid fields better than any military pilot. He wove through the spinning rocks with practiced precision, Neri secured in his ship's small med bay. They're launching interceptors. Vexa announced, her digital voice impressively calm. Recommend immediate jump to quantum substrate shift 3s. Not until we're clear of the gravitational distortion, Kalen Voss replied, hands dancing across the controls. Prepare the jump calculations. Destination, Nexar, Dynamics, Nebula 3s. A warning klaxon blared as a targeting lock pinged their hull. 3s. Kalen Voss yanked the controls, sending the Nomad into a spiraling dive between two massive asteroids. The pursuing ships hesitated, unwilling to follow such a reckless maneuver. Jump ready in 3, Vexa counted down 3s. The stars stretched into lines of light as the Nomad leapt into quantum substrate shift, leaving the Orion-packed patrol far behind 3s. Kalen Voss released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding and made his way back to the medbay 3s. Arisara had torn free of her restraints and was standing in the corner clutching a surgical tool as a makeshift weapon. Her violet eyes narrowed as Kalen Voss entered her luminescent markings, pulsing a dangerous cobalt blue 3s. Stay back, she warned, her voice stronger than it had been on the derelict ship 3s. Kalen Voss raised his hands slowly, 3s. I didn't save your life just to hurt you now, 3s. What do you want with me? Information ransom. Her gaze darted around the cramped medical space, 3s. I'll die before I betray my people. I don't want anything, Kalen Voss said, leaning against the doorframe, except maybe a thank you for the medical nanites currently rebuilding your lung. 3s. Arizara's free hand moved to her side, feeling the bandage where Kalen Voss had injected the emergency treatment. 3s. Her expression flickered between suspicion and confusion. 3s. Why would a human help in Thalari? We are at war, 3s. Kalen Voss shrugged. I'm not a soldier anymore. I'm just a salvager trying to make a living. All humans are soldiers in this war, she replied bitterly, as are all Thalari 3s. That's the kind of thinking that keeps this conflict going. 3s. Kalen Voss gestured to a screen displaying her vital signs. Your condition is stabilizing, but you need rest. Those nanites aren't cheap, And they're the only reason you're standing right now, threes. Arisara wavered slightly, her strength visibly faltering despite her determined posture. After a tense moment, she lowered the surgical tool. Where are you taking me? Somewhere safe. Somewhere neither the Orion Pact nor the Thalri Dominion will find us easily, threes. She studied him with those unsettling violet eyes. You're a deserter, threes. I prefer early retiree, threes. Kalen Voss corrected with a humorless smile. Threes. 120 years of watching people die on both sides was enough. Threes. Vexa's voice interrupted Dries. Kalen Voss. The patient requires nutrition compatible with Thalri physiology. We have adaptive nutrient solutions in storage unit 33s. Kalen Voss nodded. I'll prepare something, threes. You should lie down before you undo all my hard work, threes. Reluctantly, Arisara returned to the medical bed, though she kept the surgical tool within reach, threes. Kalen Voss retrieved the adaptive nutrient solutions and prepared a simple nutrient solution, one he'd kept aboard for the rare occasion he encountered non-human traders. When he returned, Arisara was examining the medical readouts with evident surprise, threes. These treatments they're specifically calibrated for Thalri biology, threes. Kalen Voss handed her the nutrient solution, threes. I was a combat medic before I became a salvager. Knowing how to patch up enemies can be useful, these. Arisara accepted the drink cautiously, sniffing it before taking a small sip, threes. You were trained to heal us, so you could interrogate us later. I was trained to save lives, Kalen Voss corrected firmly. The interrogation part was someone else's job, threes. A subtle shift occurred in Arisara's luminescent patterns from cobalt to a softer aquamarine, threes. She drank more deeply from the solution her body's need, overriding her suspicion, threes. My mission, she began, then stopped herself, threes. Is none of my business, Kalen Voss finished for her, unless it involves someone trying to kill us. In which case I'd appreciate a heads up. For the first time, Arisara's expression softened slightly. There were others on my ship, a full squadron. I didn't find any other survivors. She turned away, her markings dimming to a mournful blue, threes. I was the commanding officer. I should have died with them, threes. Kalen Voss recognized the weight of command, the burden of survival. He'd carried it himself once, threes. Sometimes living is harder than dying, he said quietly. 'Cause sometimes it's the only way to make their deaths mean something. Arisara looked up sharply, as if seeing him clearly for the first time, threes. Before she could respond, Mira's alert tone sounded, threes. Kalen Voss's eyes met Arisara's. Friends of yours. No, she said, sitting up straighter. 3. If they find me with you, they'll kill us both. 3s. Proximity. Alert. 2 additional vessels detected, Mira announced. 3s. 1. Orion Pact cruiser. 1. Thalri Hunter class. They're converging on our position. Kalen Voss swore under his breath as he rushed to the cockpit, Arisara following despite her injuries. Freeze. The displays showed their pursuers closing in from opposite directions. Threes. They're working together, Kalen Voss asked incredulously. Sees. Arisara leaned over the console, her proximity sending a wave of warmth across his shoulder. Raise. Impossible. Unless. What my mission? Her luminescent patterns pulsed with agitation. I accessed restricted communications networks, found anomalies in battle reports. Kalen Voss adjusted their course, diving the ship toward a dense nebula. What kind of anomalies, coordinated attacks that made no tactical sense, supply routes compromised too easily? Arisara's eyes narrowed. Someone is ensuring this war continues. Threes. A warning shot from the Orion-packed cruiser streaked past their viewport, illuminating the cockpit in harsh red light. Vexa, divert power to the quantum substrate, cloaking Kalen Voss ordered. Insufficient power. The AI responded. Stealth systems require full engine shutdown. Arizara placed her hand on Kalen Voss's arm. I can help. Thalari ships track quantum disturbances in space-time. If you can mask your engine signature, I can create a false reading to distract them. Kalen Voss hesitated only a moment before nodding. Do it. Arisara closed her eyes, placing her hands on the ship's interface panel. Her markings began to pulse rhythmically, synchronizing with the ship's power fluctuations. Thalari vessels use telepathic interfaces, she explained. Threes. I can project a false signature if I can access your ship's communication array. These. Kalen Voss quickly reconfigured the system. Threes. Vexa give her limited access to external communications. Size. Access granted. Vexa confirmed. The luminescent patterns on Arisara's skin intensified, spreading up her arms in complex formations. Kalen Voss watched in fascination as the scanner showed the Thalari vessel changing course, pursuing a phantom signal. Threes. Your military relies on conventional technology, cut power, and drift, Arisara suggested. Threes. They'll expect us to run threes. Kalen Voss made the call. Lees. Vexa emergency shutdown. All systems except life support. Threes. The Nomad went dark, drifting silently into the nebula's edge. Minutes passed in tense silence as the Orion-packed cruiser prowled nearby. Threes. Finally, its engines flared as it changed course, following the same false trail as the Thalari ship. Threes. When they were alone again, Kalen Voss restored power. Threes. That was impressive. Threes. Arizara nodded, fatigue evident in her posture. Threes. A specialized skill among my unit were trained to manipulate quantum fields. Threes. That explains why both sides are hunting you. Threes. Kalen Voss studied her with new appreciation. You're not just any officer. I was investigating anomalies in our intelligence networks when my ship was attacked. Arisara moved to the ship's computer, her fingers hovering over the interface. Threes. May I? After a brief hesitation, Kalen Voss approved. Threes. Vexa, allow information retrieval. Only. Threes. Arizara accessed the system, pulling up data on recent battle locations. Threes. There, she said, pointing to patterns forming across the display. Weapons manufacturers, supply depots, communications hubs, all targeted with precision to extend the conflict without allowing either side a decisive victory. Kalen Voss leaned closer, their shoulders touching. Threes. Who benefits from a perpetual war? Nexar Dynamics. Arisara displayed their logo. Threes. They supply both sides through shell companies. Threes. The proximity triggered something unexpected in Kalen Voss, an acute awareness of her alien yet undeniably feminine presence. He stepped back, disconcerted by his reaction. Arisara noticed her markings shifting to a curious lavender hue. Your pupils dilated, a fear response. Something like that, Kalen Voss muttered, focusing on the data. We need to find proof of Nexar Dynamics involvement, Threes. We, Arisara questioned, one eyebrow raised. Threes. You saved my ship. I saved your life. Kalen Voss shrugged. Threes. Seems we make a good team. For the first time, Arisara's lips curved in what might have been a smile, perhaps, for now. Threes. The abandoned mining outpost on Proxima's moon provided temporary sanctuary. Threes. Kalen Voss had spent hours reinforcing the outpost's security systems while Arisara analyzed the data they'd gathered. Threes. Look at this, she called, her voice tinged with barely contained anger. Threes. Kalen Voss joined her at the makeshift command center. On the screen, shipping manifests and classified communications revealed a pattern of weapons deliveries to both human and Thalri forces, all originating from Nexar Dynamics' subsidiaries. Threes. They're supplying both sides. Kalen Voss murmured, the pieces falling into place, creating an arms race. Not just supplying. Arisara corrected, pulling up more documents, manipulating these communications, show Nexar Dynamics. Operatives embedded in both military commands, influencing strategic decisions. Threes. Kalen Voss ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I saw inconsistencies during my service orders that made no tactical sense, operations that seemed designed to fail. Threes. I thought it was just incompetent leadership. It was by design. Arisara's markings pulsed a deep crimson anger. Kalen Voss had learned 120 years of war, millions dead for profit. Threes. She slammed her fist against the console, then winced. Threes. Though mostly healed, her injuries still caused pain. Threes. Kalen Voss moved without thinking, placing his hand over hers. Threes. We'll expose them, he promised. Threes. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Arisara didn't pull away as expected. Instead, her markings shifted to that curious lavender hue again. Threes. Your species touches so casually, she observed, her voice softer than he'd heard before. Threes. Not always casually, Kalen Voss replied, suddenly very aware of her proximity. Threes. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Then the outpost's alarms blared to life. Threes. Proximity alert. Vexa announced from Kalen Voss's communicator. Multiple vehicles approaching. They rushed to the security feeds. 3 unmarked shuttles were landing outside the outpost. Threes. Mercenaries. Kalen Voss recognized the configuration. Threes. Nexar Dynamics must have tracked us here. Threes. How? Arisara questioned. Threes. The data retrieval. Kalen Voss realized they monitor all access to those files. Threes. They gathered what evidence they could onto portable drives as the first explosions rocked the outpost's outer doors. There's a maintenance tunnel, Kalen Voss said, grabbing his weapon. It leads to an emergency hangar. Threes. They rushed through the narrow passageway as the sounds of intruders grew louder behind them. Threes. The hangar contained only a small atmospheric shuttle, barely enough for interplanetary travel. It'll have to do, Kalen Voss said, initiating the launch sequence. Threes. The door behind them burst open. Mercenaries and black tactical gear poured in, weapons raised. Kalen Voss positioned himself between them and Arisara. Go, he shouted, returning fire. Get the evidence out. Threes. Arisara hesitated, clearly torn between escape and joining the fight. Threes. A stray shot caught Kalen Voss in the shoulder, spinning him around. He collapsed against the shuttle ramp as Arisara cried out a sound of genuine distress that surprised even her. In a blur of motion, Arisara grabbed him and the data drive, yanking him into the shuttle. Her markings blazed bright blue as she activated her sub-quantum resonance manipulation abilities, creating a disorienting field that sent the mercenary shots. White threes. The shuttle doors sealed as they lifted off, accelerating hard through the hangar doors and into space. Threes. "You're injured," Arisara said, already examining his wound. Threes. "I've had worse." Kalen Voss grimaced. Threes. The adrenaline wearing off as pain set in. Arisara found the medical kit and began treating his shoulder with surprising gentleness. "You should have left me behind. The evidence is what matters." Kalen Voss looked up at her, his vision slightly blurred from pain. "That's not how this works." "What is this?" she asked, her hands pausing. "What are we doing?" Kalen Voss. "I'm not sure anymore," he admitted, "but I know I couldn't leave you behind, Therese." Her markings pulsed softly as she finished dressing his wound. When she spoke again, her voice carried an unfamiliar vulnerability. "Threes. Neither could I, Threes." The rusted domes of Helios Station appeared on the view screen, a smuggler's haven on the edge of regulated space. "Threes. Kalen." Voss winced as he adjusted their approach vector, his shoulder still tender, despite Arisara's skilled treatment. "Threes. Your friend can be trusted?" Arisara asked, her eyes scanning the ramshackle station with evident suspicion. "Tarnis Krell's been my contact for years," Kalen Voss assured hers. "Ex-military, like me, saw too much, said too much, got pushed out." "Threes." The landing was rougher than Kalen Voss would have liked. Arisara helped him from the shuttle, her arm around his waist, providing more support than his pride wanted to admit. Her touch left an unusual warmth through his clothing. Tarnis Krell met them at the docking bay, his weathered face breaking into a grin beneath his salt and pepper beard. Kalen Voss, still picking up strays. "I see. Threes." "Tarnis Krell. This is Arisara. She's..." Kalen Voss hesitated. "Threes." "Complicated." Arisara finished her markings, shifting to a guarded blue. "Threes." Tarnis Krell eyed her appreciatively. "Threes." "Never met." Nthalri up close. "The patterns are something else." "Threes." He led them through winding corridors to his quarters, a surprisingly spacious apartment filled with salvaged treasures from a dozen worlds. "You can stay here while Pretty Boy heals up," Tarnis Krell offered, gesturing to a spare room. "Threes." "No questions asked. That's worth at least a drink of that Centauri whiskey you're hiding in your pack." "Threes." Later, after Tarnis Krell retired to his room, Kalen Voss and Arisara examined the evidence they'd salvaged. "Threes. There's enough here to expose Nexar dynamics," Kalen Voss said, scrolling through shipping manifests. "But we need a way to broadcast it simultaneously to both governments." Arisara's fingers brushed his as she pointed to a file. "Threes. This communication node, it links to both networks." "Threes." The casual contact sent an unexpected current between them. Kalen Voss looked up, finding Arisara's violet eyes already watching him, her markings pulsing with that now familiar lavender hues. "Your wound needs checking," she said softly. Her fingers were gentle as she removed the bandage, applying fresh medication. "Threes." Kalen Voss watched her face, so focused on her task. "Thank you," he said, "not just for this, for trusting me." "Threes." "You're unlike any human I expected to meet," she admitted. "Threes." In the academy, they teach us that humans are savage, driven by base instincts. Threes. Kalen Voss smiled faintly. We're not all bad. Threes. No, she agreed, her markings rippling in what he now recognized as amusement, merely annoying threes. Their laughter, shared in this quiet moment, felt like a small miracle amid the chaos they'd endured. Morning brought the smell of synthesized coffee and the sound of Tarnis Krell speaking in hushed tones. Threes. Kalen Voss approached silently, years of training, making his movements automatic. Confirmed sighting. 1 human, 1 Thalri female. The bounty's been doubled. Kalen Voss's blood ran cold as he heard Tarnis Krell's betrayal unfold in real time. The older man was hunched over a communication terminal, speaking to someone whose insignia Kalen Voss recognized instantly. Admiral Nirek of Orion Pact Intelligence. Threes. They're resting now. Tarnis Krell continued. Threes. I've disabled their shuttle. They won't get that far. Threes. Kalen Voss backed away silently, returning to their room where Arisara was still sleeping. Threes. He touched her shoulder gently, placing a finger to his lips when her eyes flew open. We've been betrayed, he whispered. Tarnis Krell's sold us out. They gathered their essentials silently, including the precious data drive. Threes. The service corridors Tarnis Krell had shown Kalen Voss years ago would lead them to the docking bay, and hopefully another vessel they could commandeer. Threes. They were halfway there when the station's alarms blared. Threes. Tarnis Krell's voice came over the intercom. Sorry, Kalen Voss. Nothing personal, just business. Armed security personnel converged from both directions. Threes. Kalen Voss pushed Arizara toward a maintenance shaft. Threes. Go. I'll hold them off. Threes. Instead, Arizara pulled him into the shaft with her, then sealed the door with a burst from her disruptor. Threes. I told you to go, Kalen Voss said, as they crawled through the narrow space. Threes. Arisara's eyes flashed defiantly, and I chose not to listen. Threes. They emerged in a lower docking bay, finding an unmarked courier vessel, small but fast. As Kalen Voss worked to override the security lockouts, Arisara kept watch. Kalen Voss, she said suddenly. Her voice changed. If we don't make it. He turned to her, saw something in her expression that mirrored the confusion in his own heart. We'll make it, he promised, then pulled her to him in a kiss that bridged worlds. The stolen courier ship wasn't designed for comfort, but it had one invaluable feature, a military-grade cloaking system. Kalen Voss set a random course away from Helio Station, buying them time to regroup. Threes. In the cramped cabin, the air between them had changed since their impulsive kiss. Threes. Arizara's markings remained a constant lavender, occasionally flaring brighter when their eyes met. Threes. We need to focus, she said, though her gaze lingered on his lips. Threes. The data won't matter if we can't disseminate it properly. Threes. Kalen Voss nodded, pulling up the star charts. I know someone who can help, a communication specialist with the Unity Front. Threes. She operates out of Tau City. Threes. The Unity Front, Arisara questioned. Threes. A network of deserters and civilians working to end the war, Kalen Voss explained. Threes. They've suspected corporate manipulation for years, but lacked proof. Threes. Arisara moved closer, studying the charts. Threes. Her shoulder pressed against his, a warmth he was becoming increasingly aware of. The Thalri have similar factions, she admitted. We call them truth seekers. Many disappear mysteriously. Threes. Same happens to Unity Front members, Kalen Voss said grimly. Bees. We assumed it was government Black Ops 3s. Now we know better, Arisara replied, wise. Her fingers traced the path to Tau City on the display spiz. This route takes us dangerously close to a military checkpoint 3s. Kalen Voss turned to face her, their proximity suddenly electric. Vreeze. I need to understand your abilities better if we're going to get past it. Arisara hesitated, then nodded. Quantum manipulation is sacred among my people, something shared only with kin. Or she paused, her markings pulsing rapidly, or mates 3s. The implication hung in the air between them 3s. Show me, Kalen Voss said softly. Freeze. Arisara raised her hands, placing her fingertips against his temples. 3s. Relax your mind. This may feel intense. 3s. The connection began as a whisper, then flooded his consciousness. 3s. Kalen Voss gasped as sensations cascaded through him. The vibration of atoms, the pulse of quantum fields, the flow of energy through matter itself. Arisara's consciousness brushed against his alien, yet somehow familiar. When she withdrew, Kalen Voss felt her absence like a physical pain. That was intimate. Arisara finished her markings, a deep, rich purple he hadn't seen before. I've never shared that with a non-Thalrius. Kalen Voss caught her hand. Thank you for trusting me. The moment stretched between them, laden with possibilities. Then Arisara straightened her expression, becoming focused. The checkpoint uses quantum detection arrays, she explained. 3s. With what I've shown you, we can calibrate your ship's systems to create a blind spot. 3s. They worked through the night, modifying the courier ship systems according to Arisara's instructions. Kalen Voss was amazed at how quickly they fell into a rhythm, anticipating each other's needs, building on each other's ideas. Tell me about your home, Kalen Voss said during a break, watching as Arisara's markings shifted with her thoughts. Thalari Prime is mostly ocean, she replied, a note of longing in her voice. Our cities float on the surface or cling to mountain islands. The sun sets, turn the water to fire. Sounds beautiful. It was Arisara said sadly before the quantum destabilization strikes. 3s. Kalen Voss's expression darkened. The Terran colonies weren't spared either. Their eyes met in shared grief, for worlds forever changed. 3s. If we succeed, Arisara said quietly, could our peoples ever truly live in peace? People adjust, Kalen Voss replied, taking her hand. Look at us. 3s. Her markings rippled with emotion. Yes. Look at us. 3s. The ship's alert system pinged warning of their approach to the checkpoint. Kalen Voss took the controls, while Arisara placed her hands on the modified interface panel. Freeze. Ready? He asked. Arisara nodded her markings, brightening with concentration. Remember what I showed you. Feel the fields. 3s. As they approached the checkpoint, Kalen Voss surrendered to the sense Arisara had awakened in him. 3s. He could almost see the quantum detection grid, could feel where their ship needed to slip through. Now, Arisara whispered together. They guided the ship through an invisible corridor in the detection field. 3s. On the other side, they exchanged triumphant smiles. We did it, Kalen Voss said, amazed. 3s. Arisara's hand found his. We did it together. 3s. That night, They abandoned any pretense of distance, threes. Their bodies met in a dance of discovery, human and Thalri, finding unexpected harmony despite their differences. In the afterglow, Arisara's markings illuminated the cabin with pulsing patterns of contentment, threes. "If we die tomorrow," she murmured against his chest, "this was worth it." Kalen Voss tightened his arms around her. "We're not gonna die tomorrow, threes." The Nexar Dynamics headquarters dominated the skyline of New Helion, its gleaming spire reaching toward the stars like an accusation, threes. From their vantage point in a rented apartment, Kalen Voss and Arisara studied the imposing structure. Security is tightest at the upper levels, Kalen Voss noted, examining the schematics they'd obtained from the Unity front. Contact on Epsilon Serene, threes. But that's where the primary servers are located, threes. Arisara's violet eyes narrowed as she considered their options, threes. The quantum fluctuation signatures suggest they're using Thalri-based security protocols, threes. They must have stolen our technology, threes. "Can you bypass them?" Kalen Voss asked. Perhaps her markings flickered thoughtfully. "But I'll need to be inside the building's quantum field, threes." The plan they developed was audacious, threes. Kalen Voss would pose as a Nexar Dynamics security consultant, using credentials the Unity Front had provided. Arisara, with her distinctive alien features, posed a greater challenge. Threes. The markings are the problem. Threes. Kalen Voss mused gently, tracing one luminescent pattern on her forearm. They're beautiful, but unmistakably Thalri. Arisara caught his hand, her expression softening momentarily before becoming resolute. Threes. There is a technique among my people, a meditative state that suppresses our bioluminescence temporarily. Threes. Is it dangerous? Kalen Voss's concern was evident. Threes. It's uncomfortable, she admitted, like holding your breath, but with your entire being. That evening, they prepared their disguises. Kalen Voss donned the corporate attire of a Nexar Dynamics consultant, while Arisara entered her meditative state, threes. He watched in fascination as the glowing patterns on her skin gradually dimmed until they were barely visible, threes. With subtle cosmetic alterations to her features and appropriate clothing, she could pass for a human with exotic genetic modifications, something not uncommon among corporate elites, threes. "How do I look?" she asked, her voice strained from the effort of suppression. Kalen Voss's gaze traveled over her transformed appearance. Even disguised, there was something undeniably alluring about her. "Perfect. But are you sure you can maintain this?" 4 hours, she said. "No longer, threes." The next morning they entered Nexar Dynamics headquarters through the main lobby, threes. Kalen Voss presented his credentials with practiced confidence, while Arisara played the role of his assistant, her eyes downcast to hide their unusual color. "Welcome to Nexar Dynamics, Mr. Reynolds," the security officer said, after verifying Kalen Voss's credentials. "Your biometric profile has been authorized for levels 1 through 33s. "Thank you," Kalen Voss replied smoothly. "My assistant will be accompanying me to inspect the quantum security protocols, threes." The officer hesitated. "All assistants require separate clearance, threes." Kalen Voss leaned forward conspiratorially, threes. "This comes directly from Director Mallory, threes. The Thalri incursion last month has everyone on edge. My assistant has specialized training in quantum detection, threes." The name-dropping worked. Threes. The officer nodded, and issued a temporary badge for Arizara Freeze. As they entered the elevator, Kalen Voss noticed Arizara's tension. Her markings were threatening to reappear, tiny flickers of light beneath her skin. Easy, he murmured, standing close to shield her from the security cameras. Threes. We're almost there, Threes. The server level was eerily quiet, staffed by only a handful of technicians. They made their way to an isolated terminal where Arizara could access the system. Something's wrong, she whispered, her fingers hovering over the interface. Threes. These connections, they're not just to Alliance and Thalri networks. There's something else. Threes. Kalen Voss kept watch while she delved deeper. Threes. What do you mean? A third faction. Arizara set her voice tight with concentration and the strain of suppressing her markings. The data suggests Nexar Dynamics isn't just perpetuating the war, they're working with someone else. Someone manipulating both our species. Threes. Alarm suddenly blared, and the terminal locked down. Security breach detected. An automated voice announced all personnel. Initiate lockdown procedures. Threes. Kalen Voss drew his concealed weapon. Threes. We've been compromised. Threes. Security forces would be converging on their position within minutes. Arizara abandoned the terminal, her markings now visibly pulsing through her disguise. I got what we needed, she said, holding up a data crystal, but we triggered a safeguard I didn't anticipate. Threes. They hurried toward the emergency stairwell, but a security team appeared at the corridor intersection, weapons raised. Halt, the lead officer commanded. Threes. Kalen Voss pulled Arizara behind a pillar as energy bolts scorched the wall beside them. They were pinned down with more security forces, undoubtedly on the way. Threes. We need a distraction, Kalen Voss said, checking his weapons charge. Threes. Arizara's eyes met his, a decision forming. Threes. I can create one, but it will reveal what I am. Threes. Kalen Voss understood the risk. Threes. Once exposed as an Thalri, Arizara would be shot on sight. He cupped her face. Threes. There has to be another way. Threes. Trust me, she said, then closed her eyes. Her markings burst into brilliant illumination, pulsing with intensity Kalen Voss had never witnessed. The security team's communications suddenly crackled with interference, and their weapons targeting systems failed. Threes. Now they ran Arizara's glowing form both their greatest vulnerability and their unexpected advantage. The confusion she created allowed them to reach the emergency exit, but as they pushed through the door, an energy bolt caught Kalen Voss's leg. He stumbled, crying out in pain. Threes. Arizara caught him, her strength surprising as she half-carried him down the stairs. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. Believe me, Kalen Voss gasped. Take the data, complete the mission. Arizara's response was fierce, her markings blazing with determination. Not without you. They burst through the maintenance exit into the rain-slicked alleyway behind Nexar Dynamics Tower. Threes. Kalen Voss's injured leg threatened to buckle with each step, but Arizara's arm around his waist kept him moving. Transport hub is 3 blocks east, he gasped, the pain making each word an effort. Threes. Sirens wailed behind them as security forces poured from the building. Arizara guided them into the labyrinthine service passages between New Hellion's towering structures, her markings dimmed to their lowest glow, but still visible in the shadows. Threes. Your leg needs treatment, she said, her concern evident as she noted the blood soaking his pant leg. Threes. Later, Kalen Voss insisted, "We need to get off-world first." They emerged onto a crowded commercial street, immediately drawing curious glances, and Azuri supporting an injured human was not a common sight, especially with security alerts blaring across public channels 3s. There, Kalen Voss nodded toward a public transit station underground. Maglev connects to the spaceport 3s. As they approached the station entrance, Arisara suddenly pulled Kalen Voss into a narrow doorway, security drones scanning the crowd. They watched as sleek black drones hovered above the transit station, their sensors sweeping methodically through the throngs of commuters. "They'll have our biosignatures by now," Kalen Voss said grimly. "We need another way out." Arisara's expression changed, determination hardening her features. "I have an idea, but you won't like it." Before Kalen Voss could respond, she guided him deeper into the side street, toward a neighborhood populated primarily by alien refugees, including a small enclave of Thalri expatriates who had fled the war 3s. "Are you crazy?" Kalen Voss hissed. "If they recognize you as military, they won't." Arisara replied, "Not all Thalri support the Dominion. Some have suffered more than anyone 3s." The expatriate quarter was a stark contrast to New Helion's gleaming prosperity. Here, structures were makeshift, built from salvaged materials and illuminated by biosynthetic luminous algae cultivated from the Thalri homeworld 3s. Arisara approached a weathered door marked with subtle Thalri script 3s. When it opened, an elderly female with faded markings regarded them with surprise that quickly turned to suspicion 3s. "My companion needs help," Arisara said in her native language, the musical tones washing over Kalen Voss, despite his pain 3s. "We seek sanctuary." The elder studied them, her gaze lingering on Kalen Voss's injury in their clasped hands. Finally, she stepped aside. Inside, they found a gathering of Thalri defectors led by Alara, a former scientist whose markings bore the distinctive patterns of the research caste 3s. She listened intently as Arisara explained their discovery, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "We suspected corporate involvement," Alara said, examining the data crystal, "but a third faction. This changes everything." While Alara decoded the data, another Thalri treated Kalen Voss's wound with a combination of traditional remedies and scavenged medical technology. The pain subsided to a dull throb breeze. "Why help us?" Kalen Voss asked the healer, curious, despite their precarious situation. "Because you help her," the Thalri replied, simply glancing at Arisara, "and because we are tired of burying our children for a war that serves only the powerful 3s. Arisara joined them, her hand finding Kalen Voss's 3s. "Alara has confirmed our findings, 3s. Nexar Dynamics has been working with a splinter faction extremists from both our species who believe in racial purity 3s. "That makes no sense," Kalen Voss frowned. "Why would racial purists work together? They don't know they're working together," Arisara explained. Nexar Dynamics plays each side against the other, feeding information and technology to both ensuring neither gains advantage while promoting hatred and fear. Alara approached with a portable communicator. "We've established contact with the Unity Front. They're sending transport, but you'll have to reach the old industrial sector." Security will be watching all transit routes, Kalen Voss said, testing his bandaged leg. Breeze. Not all of them. Elara smiled enigmatically, leading them to what appeared to be a solid wall. Threes. It slid open to reveal a maintenance tunnel, part of a forgotten network from the city's early construction. Threes. This leads to the industrial sector, Elara explained. Threes. It's how many of us escaped the internment camps during the early days of the war. Threes. As they prepared to leave Arisara, embraced Elara. Thank you, Sister. Threes. End this war, the older Thalri replied. Threes. Show them we can be more than enemies. Threes. The tunnel was narrow and damp, forcing them to move slowly with Kalen Voss's injuries. In the close confines, Arisara's markings provided their only light, casting everything in a soft blue glow. Threes. Your people risked everything to help us, Kalen Voss said, to help me. Threes. They helped us because they saw something I didn't expect to find, Arisara replied softly. Threes. Hope. They emerged into the abandoned industrial sector, just as a sleek unmarked shuttle descended. Threes. The Unity Front pilot, a grizzled veteran, eyed their unusual pairing with raised eyebrows but asked no questions. As the shuttle lifted off New Helion's skyline receding below them, Kalen Voss and Arisara watched security forces converging on the expatriate quarter. Will they be safe? Kalen Voss asked, concern etching his features. Arisara nodded. Alara has survived worse. By now they'll have scattered to other safe houses. The shuttle accelerated toward the upper atmosphere, momentarily outpacing their pursuers. But the reprieve was short-lived, as the pilot's console blared warnings. Threes. Multiple hostiles on intercept course, he announced grimly. Threes. Orion Pact and Thalri signatures. Somebody really wants you dead. Threes. Arisara's fingers intertwined with Kalen Voss's, or silenced. The Unity Front's primary communications array orbited an unremarkable dwarf star at the edge of contested space, chosen specifically for its isolated position and minimal strategic value. Threes. As their shuttle approached the station, Kalen Voss and Arisara prepared the evidence they'd gathered. Threes. We'll have a short window, the pilot warned, monitoring the pursuit craft, still doggedly following their trail. The transmission must go out before they jam our signals. The station itself was a marvel of cobbled-together technology, salvaged Thalri transmitters, interfaced with human encryption systems, all powered by an experimental reactor core. Threes. Approaching docking bay, the pilot announced, his hands dancing across the controls as he evaded the first volley of warning shots from their pursuers. Threes. Inside the station, a skeleton crew of Unity Front operatives greeted them with grim determination. News of their evidence had already spread through secure channels, creating a palpable tension. Threes. The array is prepped for simultaneous broadcast on all Alliance and Dominion frequencies, the communications officer reported. But we'll need time to integrate the Thalri data formats. Threes. Arisara stepped forward, her markings pulsing with purpose. Threes. I can assist with the integration. Threes. Then do it, Kalen Voss urged, his voice low but resolute, as he leaned against the cold console. We have one shot at this. Threes. Within the cramped communications hub of the Unity Front station, the hum of machinery and the rapid keystrokes of technicians filled the air. Threes. General Damaris Sin's voice cut through the tension. Threes. Naira Vel status on the data. Merge. Threes. Almost complete, Commander. Arisara's signal is perfectly interfacing with our arrays. Now, replied Niravel, her tone brisk with determination. Across the room, Kalen Voss exchanged a glance with Arisara. This evidence, our lives, they're on the line for the truth, he murmured. Threes. Arisara's violet eyes shimmered. Threes. The truth will out. Kalen Voss. Threes. I never imagined our lives would be the spark that ends this war. Threes. A sudden alarm rang out, and voices converged in urgent dialogue, broadcasting in 3-2. One now announced Valen as the integrated data burst forth across every known channel. In distant command centers and war rooms, officials from both human and Thalri governments reacted in stunned silence before a flood of dialogue erupted. Threes. An alliance minister's voice echoed on every screen. Citizens, the evidence confirms that Nexar Dynamics and a rogue faction allied with them engineered our conflict for profit. Threes. An Thalari dignitary responded on a separate channel, her tone wavering between sorrow and resolve. The manufactured war must end. Today we stand at the threshold of a new beginning. Amid the chaos, a crackling transmission reached Kalen Voss's personal comm. Threes. Kalen Voss, this is Director Morales. Threes. The truth you've delivered is shaking the foundations of both our worlds. Threes. We need you and your Thalri companion at the Peace Summit immediately. Threes. Kalen Voss's heart pounded as he looked to Arisara. Threes. They want us to be the face of reconciliation. I never thought I'd see the day when a human and an Thalri would be ambassadors for peace. Threes. Arisara's reply was quiet, yet firm. Threes. It's ironic, isn't it? We fought to survive, and in doing so forced a truth that neither of our people could ignore. Threes. Later that day, in a cavernous hall filled with representatives from both civilizations, heated dialogue and cautious hope mingled in the air. Threes. A human delegate stated, "We have long believed our enemies were born of hatred. Now we learn we were manipulated all along." Threes. An Thalri envoy countered, "Our grief is deep, but so is our desire for a future free from manufactured enmity." Threes. Kalen Voss, standing beside Arisara, added, "We both know war doesn't create heroes, it creates survivors." Threes. Let our survival be the testament to the possibility of peace. Threes. A murmur of agreement swept through the assembly. One of the negotiators and elder from the Thalri Council spoke softly, "Our traditions may be ancient, our differences vast, yet our hopes align. May this be the dawn of unity." Threes. After the summit in the quiet sanctuary of a discreet garden behind the assembly hall, Kalen Voss and Arisara found a moment away from prying eyes. Threes. I never imagined we'd be here, caught between two worlds, trying to bridge an endless divide. Kalen Voss confessed as they strolled beneath softly glowing biosynthetic luminous trees. Threes. Arisara's voice was gentle. Threes. I grew up taught that our very nature set us apart, but standing here with you, I feel those lessons unraveling. Threes. Kalen Voss paused, touching her hand. Threes. Our bodies, our histories, they're different. But what if our differences aren't obstacles, but opportunities to create something new? Her eyes searched his. Do you really believe we can overcome centuries of conflict, that our union can serve as more than just a symbol, It has to, Kalen Voss replied, because if we let fear dictate our future, then nothing will change. Threes. I'm willing to risk everything to prove that we can live as one. Threes. Their conversation deepened into a blend of tender vulnerability and fierce determination. Threes. I worry, Arizara admitted, about the cultural rifts. My people, our biology, it isn't like yours. Our lives, our lifespans, even our rituals, they're so distinct. Kalen Voss squeezed her hand reassuringly. Maybe our love can forge a bridge. There's talk of new medical research ways to integrate Thalri biochemistry with human physiology. Threes. If the scientists succeed, we might not just coexist, we might truly merge our strengths. Threes. At that moment, a discreet chime on Kalen Voss's communicator interrupted them. Kalen Voss. Urgent update from the Unity Front Lab. A prototype serum derived from both human and Thalri genetic material shows promise. Threes. It could stabilize and even enhance interspecies compatibility. Threes. Kalen Voss's eyes lit up. Threes. That's it then. Threes. We prove that our differences can be harmonized. Threes. Arizara smiled softly, her markings pulsing a gentle lavender. Threes. It seems even science has joined our cause. Threes. Our union is no longer a risk. It's a beacon of hope. In the following weeks, as peace negotiations advanced, dialogues continued across every level of society. In public forums, town hall meetings, and even in hushed dinner table conversations, the story of a human and an Thalri overcoming hatred to forge unity resonated powerfully. One evening, during a private meeting between representatives of the newly formed Peace Council, a human diplomat said our citizens are demanding change. They look to you two as proof that the old divisions can be left behind. Threes. And Thalri Council member agreed we must now consider policies that encourage cultural exchange and scientific collaboration. The serum trial is just the beginning. Threes. Kalen Voss and Arizara, now celebrated figures, yet craving the privacy they once knew, spoke quietly in a secluded corner of a modest conference room. I still remember the sound of enemy fire, the desperate scramble to escape. Kalen Voss said, his tone wistful. And now, here we are choosing to believe in a future together. Threes. Arizara rested her head against his shoulder. Threes. We became the symbols of peace unwillingly, but maybe that's our gift, to show both our peoples that reconciliation is possible, that love can thrive, even in the aftermath of war. As the negotiation concluded successfully, a plan emerged for a new colony, a haven where humans and Thalri could live side by side, learning from each other and growing together. Threes. In a celebratory broadcast from the newly established colony's inaugural ceremony, a joint human Thalri council member declared today marks not an end but a beginning. Threes. Our colony, Aurora Nexus, will stand as a testament to unity, where the wounds of the past give way to the promise of a shared future. Later, under the soft glow of an alien sunset, Kalen Voss and Arizara sat atop a balcony overlooking the nascent colony. Their dialogue was quiet, but potent. "Do you ever miss the old days?" Kalen Voss asked, his voice reflective. Threes. "Sometimes," Arizara admitted, "but I also see a future where our children, half human, half Thalri, can learn that differences are strengths, not weaknesses." Threes. Kalen Voss grinned the memory of countless battles, softened by the hope of peaceful days. Then let's build that future together. Threes. We'll pioneer this colony, shape it with our hands, and prove that love and understanding can triumph over fear. Threes. Arisara's eyes sparkled with determination. Threes. Together, we will create a new chapter. A world where every voice is heard, every culture respected, and where our union is not just a symbol, but a living, breathing reality. Threes. In the months that followed, Aurora Nexus blossomed. Meetings were filled with enthusiastic dialogue between human engineers and Thalri biotechnicians. Threes. Pass me the nanite injector, one human scientist requested, while an Thalri researcher responded, ensure the pulse rate matches our biosynthetic luminous calibration. Threes. The collaboration was seamless, a fusion of traditions, techniques, and dreams. At the colony's grand opening, during a public address brimming with hope, Kalen Voss declared our past was marred by manufactured hatred and endless war. But today, in Aurora Nexus, we choose unity. Threes. We choose to believe that our differences enrich us, not divide us. Threes. Arisara added her voice, resonant and clear. Let our lives be the living proof that even the deepest wounds can heal, that love can bridge worlds. This colony is for every human and every Thalri who dares to dream of a better tomorrow. Threes. As applause swelled and cheers filled the air, the couple exchanged a look of quiet triumph and shared understanding. Their journey had been wrought with peril, sacrifice, and doubt, but in their union a new era was born. Later that night, beneath a tapestry of stars unspoiled by the scars of war, Kalen Voss and Arisara found solace in each other's arms. In the soft murmur of the colony, settling into peace, they whispered promises of a shared future, one where dialogue, understanding, and love rewrote the narrative of two civilizations once torn apart.